All right, good morning, everyone. As everybody logs into our bi-weekly webinar, where you get a chance for us to talk about some of the things that might be of most interest to you. We've done an awful lot in the last 2 weeks. We'll talk about some of those, from seeing a portfolio manager yesterday of our core bond fund to research on different places for you to live. Lots of reading as well on happiness and things we can do to promote that as well. So there's a lot of things going on. I've got the new book for our book club, and it may seem by repeat author, but there's two authors of it, and I'll tell everybody about that later because the team's probably going, what is it? At any rate, I want to continue today and go big to begin with. So going big is this weekend having just a wonderful, wonderful family gathering with my daughters. My wife who's on a kind of a women's trip right now for 4 or 5 people. She had a great time with that. But we did a lot of things around the campfire. And as things start to turn here a little bit yellow and red, I love the fall time. It's a great time for reflection. So it was really started with the football game. I don't know if many of you went to high school football games way back when, but my daughters are both in high school, freshman and senior. So we know the kids they're playing with and who are all in the field, and it makes it much more interesting as well. So really about the fall season, the enjoyment of family, community, the enjoyment of friends, and spending time outside, doing all sorts of fun things in the fall. With that, I'll pass it to, how about Ken?
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Good to be here with you all as usual. Hello to all the clients that are watching now and later. Always good to be with you guys. I'm grateful for the windshield time I get with my oldest daughter, Adriana. Sometimes one-on-one is a premium sometimes with all of us parents. And so it's brought us closer together with her new schedule with being at middle school, starting earlier. I get to take her every morning, which is really wonderful. So I get a good 15, 20 minutes with her every single morning. And that windshield time really has brought us closer and really understand her a little more and what she thinks from time to time. So I'm grateful for that opportunity to get closer to my oldest daughter at this point in time.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Many of you probably don't know that Ken started the industry as a bank teller. It ended when a woman came in and she asked, "Hey, can you check my balance?" And Ken pushed her over. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that old story.
She dropped below the minimum balance. That's
she couldn't stay standing. Sorry about that. Had to start with the dad jokes. I thought that was a good one. But anyway, how about Zach? How about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Extremely grateful just for trying my best this summer and recently to have a servant mindset in all scenarios. And this weekend, have a 24-hour fitness event that kind of came out of the 100-mile race earlier this year that I did, the 100-mile ultra marathon, and bringing about 5 gyms together to celebrate the love for fitness and also to lift up people with disabilities. So there's going to be a segment of that time where a Special Olympic powerlifting team comes in and we just cheer them on. So that's this weekend at one of the gyms I go to, but just humbled and blessed by all the amazing people in my life and can't wait to see the collateral good that occurs when you bring people together like that.
Phenomenal. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. How about Ashley?
Thank you, Chris. I'm grateful for the fall harvest season. I am blessed with lots of friends that have gardens, and I have been able to go pick some good fresh things and just take them home to utilize a healthy meal at home. So I'm just grateful for the fall harvest.
Awesome. Thank you. Have you been stealing from my garden? Because I'm trying to figure out where all my vegetables have been going.
I actually have not yet.
You should. Yeah. Come on. That's what it's for. How about Michael?
Chris, I'm gonna give a little bit of gratitude to Zach. I do this on occasion just to remind him all the stuff that he does and how much good it creates for those around us. But he gave us a book called The Go-Giver recently, and I finally had the capacity to be able to open that book up, and I should say took my own time to be able to invest in that. And it's quite the read. It's a very good one when it's just reinforcing the reasons why we give and why we should actually make sure that we pay attention to receiving gifts in a certain way. So sometimes we feel like we're doing good by trying to, in a way, politely refuse a gift if we believe the gift itself is something that's not needed by us and not needed to be given by the other. But truly, that just creates it's the flow of everything. So to be a good receiver is just as important as being a good giver. So Chris, feel free to give me anything you'd like. I mean, honestly, those vegetables, whatever. If you got some golf clubs laying around,
a little later on, Michael.
I'd be happy to
practice
this receiving thing.
A little later on, Michael, I'm going to give you a minute. That's awesome. I agree. So I read the book Go-Giver as well. I took the time to do that maybe a month or two ago. And the number one thing I get out of it is if you can make other people feel special, appreciated, and important, that is the key to life. So I like to distill books down to one concept. That's the one I took from that, which is outstanding. Thank you. How about Jen?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Just a bit of gratitude to my parents. They are celebrating 50 years this week of
Awesome.
wedded bliss. So I the same person, so that's a big deal. So we're all getting together as a family and taking them out to our favorite supper club, Ishnala in the Dells. And it's going to be a great time. So just really happy for them and happy to be seeing my family this weekend.
Awesome. You know, what's funny is that I appreciate the celebration, but when Jenny tells me it's the Dells, I automatically think of like circuses and big top
I
stuff.
know.
It's funny. I know there's this incredible supper club, but I can't help but think of that.
I know. But if you haven't been there, anyone on this call, Ishnala is one of the best supper clubs in Wisconsin. It actually won that award. That's not my opinion. So definitely.
Either way, they're both qualified opinion. So jumping in today, I want to jump into a couple things because a lot of you are on the call because it's serious. The market's been in correction in the last 3 weeks. And I know that more people tune in when the market corrects than they do when the market's good. Also, when we tend to hit fall, people become more serious about their planning. A few things I went over just recently, I was looking on chat.gpt and other things, and also just on Google. I actually Google questions on it from time to time to see what the biggest questions are and the biggest unhappiness and regrets. And 3 things I think retirees have the biggest regrets on is a vague financial plan, no real idea about how to produce money from it as well. That's number 2. Number 3 is believing that they have lifelong employment. So lifelong employment, I guess. Those are 3 of the biggest concerns people have. And one of the biggest regrets people didn't think they would have is not having any purpose in retirement, really being lost. It's called listless. There's actually a syndrome, which is called the nothing syndrome. So if we can explore that a bit later, we've done a lot with our purpose workshops. I know my mom has talked to me a lot about those and how those have been beneficial to a lot of people. So we'll talk more about purpose as we move along. And today, a little bit later on at 10 o'clock, we're going to talk about where will I live? This is designed as we mature to talk about where will I live. It could be subjects as much as another state. It could also be in another residence. It could be in the existing residence you're in. But we're going to ask a lot of questions. Today is an exploratory discussion about how and what you want to know, the questions you want to ask. So if you don't know them, we've got people who can also ask those kind of questions. But really today is an information gathering. We'd also like people who have made the move, their positives, their negatives, their regrets. Those are things that are very important to others as they make those decisions as well. So please share that if you've also experienced moving into a facility or a location or to another state and back, because we've had several clients who have moved to, say, Texas or Florida. And when they get unhealthy, when something occurs, they move back here pretty expeditiously because they find that the health system here is actually very good and it's home and there's others around. Anyway, what I also wanted to say, you've seen markets correct last few weeks. We're going to have Mike and Zach talk more about those. We had a wonderful meeting here just recently with one of the portfolio managers, which I'm sure Mike will talk about from our core bond fund. And I got to share some old stories that I had of being in New York and learning about something called synthetic insurance, which was derivatives, which caused a lot of 2009. That was in about 2004. There's some really fun times to go back and listen to. And I hadn't been on too many long due diligence meetings before, but it was fascinating. So I asked some different questions about the environment to see perspective-wise where we're going, not so much what's going on, and then share with them. It's so awesome why they do what they do and how it helps our portfolio, more importantly, how it helps you. So sharing the human side of it is often something they don't share in those due diligence meetings, which I thought was great. But coming back again, the concerns that you may have about markets and perspective. When we've had a wonderful run in any market, and I saw this, I probably should have brought it up to you right away, and I think I did in one of the biweekly webinars, but I brought up immediately, when there's a run like we had in the first 5 or 6 months of this year, expect there to be some pain afterward. You don't have upturns of 30% without some sort of recovery or rebound, or it's called a downward rebound. That's what I want to call it. I'm going to call it a downward rebound. That's a new word for correction. A downward rebound. And what it is, it's just something. The market doesn't go up forever. Earnings don't go up forever. We're in a period right now where people are very skeptical. There's some positives out there. Potentially Japan has turned the corner. They actually have inflation, which is really, really good for their economy. They haven't had it in almost 30 years. You're finding some of the European yields that used to be negative. Yeah, that's right. They used to be negative, are actually going the other direction, which is a positive thing. And that's helped our bond fund managers quite a bit. In the United States, though, if you watch the news, I'm going to call it the catastrophist media that likes to, I guess I'll quote Nick Murray, it likes to spurge sewage and all sorts of horrible things at you all day long. It's really hard to feel positive right now. It's hard to look at the economy and go, this is really what I want to do. I want to really do this, or I really want to jump in the market. Now, there's a ton of cash still sitting on the sideline. So in perspective, There's a lot of dry gunpowder out there, and it's going to go somewhere. But those easy dividends that were 2 and 3% when money markets were at 1 or 0.5% aren't there for the pickings like they were. People aren't just blindly putting money. They're sitting going, well, I'm okay getting 5% right now in a money market, or 4 or 5.4 if you're with some of the stuff that we've got. But I just don't know what to do right now. Now, no doubt will they look for a place or a home for it. So this is really a parking place and trying to find some positivity of an upturn. Behind it, the economic data has been, we haven't had recession. That disappointed a lot of people. The Fed may raise rates a little bit again as they see inflation is persisting longer than they expected. We look at it, we say we are basically neutral. The economy is what it is. It's going to go up and down. You're going to find very positive times and negative times. It doesn't change your plan. It changes how you feel, but only you are the ones who can take those feelings and turn them into whatever you want for thoughts, emotions, or actions. The unfortunate things with most Americans is those feelings equate to negative selling and getting out at the bottom. The average investor, this is according to JP Morgan, was about 6% less than the market over the last decade. Why? They could have just sat there and they could have been fine, right? No, their own behavior in getting in and out at the very wrong times caused them to lose more than half of the return of the market. This is, again, from JP Morgan's own data from their market watch. At any rate, I wanted to share a couple of those things as we go through this, because corrections are going to be normal. They're going to be a healthy part of the environment. You know, as you look at them, they're just as celebrated as the peaks are as well. I know not on your statements, but they should be, because again, like today here in Wisconsin, it's been raining for 2 days. For some of you in Iowa and other places, you'd love to have rain because you haven't had rain, you know, maybe once in the last 2 months. And crops are paying for it, your flowers are paying for it, but we need that. We need to have these tough days for things to go higher. We need to have a lot of concern. And there's a lot of worry out there. It's indicated by the VIX and the markets. Remember, the markets tell us how worried people are about some events. At any rate, I just wanted to share a bit of the perspective with you on that. Hopefully that's beneficial. We can talk more in detail when we sit down. We'll continue on these kind of topics here, but why don't we jump first into Mike's minute. Mike, what do you have for us?
Well, actually, I have quite a bit. So 1 minute. We'll see how this goes.
Minute 30, maybe.
All right, we'll see what happens. Yeah, Chris alluded to the fact that we had the ability to, and actually the privilege to be able to meet with one of the portfolio managers of a mutual fund that we recommend. And now a lot of that conversation circulates around the actual strategy itself. And so that compliance doesn't cut me off at this point, I'm not going to get into the actual details of the specific mutual fund, but we're also able to talk a little bit about the macroeconomic environment. And they like to look outwards in a certain context. And now we always want to say that we do not have a crystal ball. Nobody truly knows what's going to happen. And a lot of this stuff is talking about the ever inevitable unforeseen event that, of course, will forever occur. And with that being said, one of the things and one of the questions that we brought up were money markets. So it's a beautiful cash alternative right now for a safety position. If this is money that you need in the immediate short term and you have to have it available, it is something that has been historically a very conservative and safe investment. And for the most part, you can rely on that being there in its capacity when you need it. But the idea that bonds are back, and the Federal Reserve just did something called, and get this, a hawkish pause. So pauses, which are normally known as being dovish because they're not actually actively making any sort of change on what's happening in their fiscal policy at this moment, but monetary policy, I should say. But taking a step back, taking a pause, but stating that, you know, there could be further rate hikes in the future, which is what's created some of the volatility since the last Fed meeting. That being said, rates are now at a point at 5.5%. That allows bonds to stabilize. When they're not raising rates, the price of the bonds do not come back down, and more bonds are able to be issued at the current rate that's now available. And so that's a wonderful percentage that you're able to get on a bond investment. Now, bonds are going to have a little bit of volatility. They're going to move because they trade in the open market. But that being said, you have the ability then to capture side when that unforeseen event occurs, because when the Fed has to raise or lower rates at some point in the future, it's going to push bond prices up. And so now you have a little bit more stability in what previously as last year, and it's scary to get back in something that really had such a hard time last year. But at this point where rates are, you could take maybe a little bit more risk than that money market fund, and it could pay off quite well for you long term if you don't need that money right away in the future. There's safety in bonds. It's safer than an equity position. So it's something to consider, and not just to head first into a money market when it comes to some of these positions. So thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Mike. That's really short. I thought there was a whole lot more. I'm sorry.
I mean,
really
if you want
thought
to
there'd be a
give me
whole lot
more time, I'll receive
Well, I
it.
was gonna, but man, I was actually just surprised about that. I know you've got like four or five more pages of stuff to look at. So with that, I appreciate your time on that. Let's go to Ashley. Ashley, how about yourself? I'm still looking for a great name for Ashley's, additions and subtractions from budgets. That doesn't make sense as well. I'm going to come up with a different one every time, but I'm sure I'm going to center on one at some point here. But right now, let's call it Ashley's Adages. How about that?
Perfect. Thank you, Chris.
You
So today I'm going to talk about home insurance. So it barely gets a lot of attention. It's not something that's always on the top of our minds, but it is something that could quietly be costing you more money than it needs to. So I want to take a few looks at a couple of the key points on ways to save you money when looking at your home insurance. Increasing your deductible. So according to NerdWallet, if you increase your $1,000 deductible amount to $2,500 a year, you can save on average about 11% on your homeowner's insurance. So just something to maybe look at the math on, consult with your agent, and consult with your insurance company. And that's just a good possible way to save some money on your home insurance. Making your home secure. Having those fire smoke detectors along with a burglar or a home security system and deadbolt locks on your main entrances can be something that saves you money on your home insurance also. So if they don't know that, make sure to give them a call and you can save some money. Ask about discounts. There's discounts out there for good credits, things that don't automatically, the insurance companies might not know. So don't be afraid to ask for some discounts that they offer. Account for home improvements. If you do have an older home and you upgrade the plumbing system, for example, or the electricity in the house, you can have an inspector come out, get that approved, and then apply to or make a claim to your homeowner's insurance, and they should give you a discount on your home insurance for upgrading your home. Making sure that your bundle and your auto and your home insurance are bundled can save you a bunch of money also. So just make sure that those two things are done if you don't have them. Building your credit score, as I previously mentioned, if you have a higher credit score, you should be getting in one of those automatic discounts. So just make sure that you do see that discount listed on your policy. And get rid of those high risk items around your house. Sorry, but trampolines are one of those things. If your insurance does know about it, they do cost a little bit more. And getting rid of some of those things like a pool, if you can, if it's obviously not in ground, that can save you some money also. Obviously, consult with your agent on ways to save money for your home insurance. And back to you, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ashley. I appreciate that. I think you took more than Mike's minute. That's awesome. So Mike, sorry, part of your minute was Ashley's. I appreciate that one. As we go through again, there's quite a bit going on, and thank you for the saving tips and ideas of enhancing your life. There's a lot that's going on too when it comes today to premiums, when replacement costs versus just an insured cost. That's a huge one. And I think one of the restaurants in our city was actually unfortunately it burnt down about 3 or 4 years ago, and it hasn't been rebuilt until just now because they were insured for a fixed rate of a certain amount because the building wasn't very expensive as it was built, but to rebuild it was about thrice the price once it happened. So they got stuck. They could not reopen it. They've been holding fundraisers, finding out ways to scrape money together. But one thing you want to take a look at, is it replacement value or is it a fixed value on your insurance as well? So that's one really big tip we actually got from one of our centers of influence in one of our center of influence meetings. So I want to thank them for that. Let's go to Zach's facts. Zach, what facts should we know about the market? And then make some predictions as well.
Always, we're real good at those predictions, but we'll go through just like we normally do, just what the different indexes are doing. As Chris mentioned, just a little bit of a pullback over the last few weeks. I'll try to round to the nearest whole number to follow along here, but everything's off about 3 to 7% from our last webinar 2 weeks ago. The Dow Jones is about 1% positive on the year, about 3% off of 2 weeks ago. The S&P 500 is still double-digit returns for the year at about 11%, but about 5% off of the last 2 weeks. The NASDAQ, which is 50% weighted towards technology, is still 31% positive on the year. So that's where Chris mentioned the very beginning about perspective of having a huge, really upturn, an abnormal upturn to start the year. It just only makes sense, just like a rainy day, that for your grass to get greener, it needs to rain once in a while. And it's the same for the markets. The international is about 2.5% positive on the year. Emerging markets right around 1% positive on the year. And the Russell 2000 had some of the larger pullbacks over the last 2 weeks, about flat for the year now, after a pretty good upturn middle of the summer. On the growth portion of smaller size companies, 3% positive, and then the value side, about 3.5% on the down side on a year-to-date basis. But this, what we really search for during these as well, is the reaffirmation of our timeless pieces, and one of those is rebalancing. So if we would have rebalanced any time last year, value was actually better in the small cap size, so we would have trimmed off of that, bought more of growth. It's fascinating how well rebalancing works on an annual basis every single year, and why it's a timeless piece of ours. On the fixed income side of things, 1-year treasury is about 5.4% right now as far as a yield. The 3-year is 4.8, the 5-year is 4.6, and the 10-year is 4.5. So when we're looking for getting some of that cash to work, like Mike mentioned, keeping the maturity short, if you're looking at CDs at the bank, looking 6 to 12 months, being careful about extending it much farther out of there, and also looking at the money market options available. But with that, Chris, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that. Once again, I appreciate the perspective and things going through. One thing I wanted to say, and this is just something you should learn. It's never fun to hear some of these things, but this is how the market moves. And once you learn it, you'll be more patient with it. The market moves up slowly and down quickly. That's a lot of research, 30 years in the making almost. But I want to tell you, once you learn that, that is a plan saver. So the market moves up slowly and down quickly, but overall it's an upward line. So with that, how about Ken's Corner? How about, Ken, let's take a look at some of the ideas that you have today for us and can enlighten us on the planning side of the equation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate it. There's a little buzz around right now with selling tickets, concert tickets, sporting events tickets. There's a new thing that's out there. I know a lot of you have a side hustle of Taylor Swift and selling tickets and stuff. I'm just joking, but if you are, there's a new rule around selling tickets and making a profit from them. It used to be, I think, $20,000 if you made a profit, you had to report, but now they actually dropped it, I think, to $600. So consult with your tax advisor if you do have a little bit of a thing with tickets, just to be aware of that piece, not that you get caught off guard if you do have something like that. So the second topic I'd like to talk about is a tender one, but it's coming up more and more. Funeral trust, funeral planning, just making sure that those end of life plans are there if you're thinking about them, typically done through a funeral home. But there are ways to basically prepay and get your wishes in place before something does happen. So the last topic I want to talk about is Family Matters. It was a sitcom back in the 80s and 90s with the Winslows. No, I'm just joking. But when it comes to Family Matters, it's an interesting one because when you think of a family recipe, and this is a pretty larger topic, but I just sat in a class recently and I learned a few things. I wanted to share it with you guys. Is that when you think of a family recipe that gets handed down from generation to generation, it gets perfected over time. It gets talked about, it gets tweaked. When you look at wealth, just as a broad brush here, 70% of money is lost by the second generation. 90% of the money is lost by the third generation. So why is that? Sometimes it comes down to families. It comes down to conversations that are happening in families or not happening in families. And so when you look at Family Matters, money can be a pretty topic that doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot. Because one of the concerns that we all have is what happens if my kids or grandkids really know what we have? Will it change the relationship of our family dynamic if they find out what we have or don't have? And so that's a pretty huge concern about, just being exposed like that. And so it takes time. And instead of saying dollar amounts, I have this or we have this, what's interesting is even if we do the smartest tax planning for you and we really optimize that for you and get your money in a position for you and your family, you know, if it doesn't go down, it doesn't stay in the family, what's it all for then? You know, what was the purpose of that? So maybe a little softer topics like feeling questions around, you know, what's your view on money? What do you like about money? So these are questions you can ask with inside the family to say, what do you like about money? What don't you like about money? And then you get to really feel like, well, what's your relationship with money? You know, do you check your balances every day? Do you not? Do you not look for a year? You know, everyone has a different view on what money is and what money isn't and what it can do for them. Or feelings like when I save, I feel this. When I have debt, I feel this. You know, when I invest, I feel this way. You know, so just understanding more of the feelings of the family can really bring out some really nice conversations, and that can be helpful for family planning and family matters, if you will. So, Chris, I'd like to hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate that. A lot of the conversation today has been about obviously markets, recent conversation, and about inheriting money. There's been a lot of unfortunate passing, if you will, but people receiving money from previous generations. So it's almost like we have a fourth module in what we do. We, you know, genting is, you know, obviously helping you retire to live it, to plan it, live it, and give it, but it's almost inherited as well, because a lot of people make quite a few mistakes in that process, both tax-wise, not preparing for it, spending money before they have taxes paid. There's a lot of different questions, but in the family wealth distribution planning area, there have been more and more questions about how do I efficiently take the money that I have if I'm not going to use it all and pass it to the next generation. So there's a lot going on with those, Ken. Thank you tremendously. I appreciate that as well. The conversations abound on many different topics. The conversation today later at 10 o'clock will be around where will I live? Where will I live? And start that conversation. We've got some great ideas, some great clients who've moved into different areas, which are awesome. One thing I wanted to say too, there's two things. One about you being an author. Number two, about relationships. I just saw some recent news and I was reading it, and it was talking predominantly, and it was a new book as well, about how most people over the last 30 years have met online by algorithms that match up your similarities. All right, you've heard about that. There's dating apps, there's marriage apps, there's all sorts of things, but most marriages now have started by dating online. What they're finding out is interesting is they're matching people who are the same. What they're finding out in research is happiness and longevity actually lies when people are different. So we've been matching people for the short term, which is being the sameness. Oh, we can talk about baseball, football, you know. I can tell dad jokes and somebody appreciates them, right? But actually the best relationship might be somebody who doesn't appreciate the dad jokes I tell. So I guess to all of you, you must appreciate me, because I know you don't care for the dad jokes necessarily, joking, if you will. But I think as we come back to this, what's interesting about it is it's celebrating the differences we have with those we just, you know, live with or are around us. And especially when it came to family matters, a big portion was this. One thing we need to do with family is to have discussions and frank discussions about how people feel about things. Don't just assume after 23 years or 50 years together that you know what somebody else is thinking. Literally ask them, because their minds may change. They may want to verbalize that. Having great conversation around that are super important. Also, maybe don't look at the idea of how you would want to marry somebody who's exactly like you. Anyway, interesting to look at the idea here. Another one is the author, and I'll stop on that idea because I can go very, very deep into that, and we don't have a lot of time left here. But author, you are the author of your own life. Very important to know. I talked to my daughter about this just recently as well. You feel what you feel, right? That's can be undeniable. However, you get to choose what you do with it. Feelings are like the nudge in the ribs, like, oh, you know, oh, that made me feel like this. The next thing you do is up to you. If you feel bad about it, if you feel anxiety, we just had a call, I think it was Tuesday morning with a group of advisors from around the nation, and we talked about anxiety as a choice. You choose to be anxious about something. You choose to be fearful about it. And as you discuss it, people right away are like, no, I don't. That just happens. But actually, when you're the author of your life and you believe it, everything you have, everything that manifests, some you might think are by chance and some may be, but actually most things show up in your life because of what you've authored. It's your life, it's your mind, and how you deal with those things that show up is extremely important. Why some people on their deathbed can be the happiest people in the world, and why some people who have tons of money and tons of everything that we think we should get in life are some of the most miserable people in the world can be your proof. So look at this. There's children. Oprah Winfrey talked about a young man that she became good friends with who had a terminal illness. She became one of her best friends as a 14-year-old. He passed away 6 months later, but he was the happiest kid in the world in person she'd seen for those 6 months. So I'm going to say this. Sometimes happiness is a choice. Sometimes being the author of your own life helps you own it. And you guys have had many incredible, I'm going to call it Pulitzer Prize winning lives that you've authored. We appreciate you sharing them with us here. So I just wanted to go through some of that as well. As I get to the last section here, I'm going to give it to Just Jenny. It's going to be her section called Just Jenny. She's going to tell us what we need to pay attention to. On my phone, she actually still Just Jenny, which is funny. So I like to bring that up as her segment today. Just Jenny, tell us what we need to pay attention to coming up.
You got it. Thank you, Chris. So as Chris already highlighted, right after this call, well, at 10 o'clock, we will be heading into a Q&A workshop where we really will be depending on your participation as we build a Where Should I Live or Where Will I Live workshop for you guys. So we're going to hear what you're curious about, what questions you have, and we will be building out a fantastic workshop series with that content. So if you haven't registered for that, you can still click the link within your happenings email that you receive. And join us at 10 o'clock right after this call. Moving into October, that closes out September, believe it or not. So moving into October, we have our birthday lunch on October 18th. Again, RSVP links will all be in your happenings email. And then on October 24th, we will be heading into our fall forum. This one, we have in Appleton on the 24th. And if you are closer to Milwaukee, you can register for the location on the 25th. So it's a great opportunity to dive deeper into market updates and relevant information that you should be aware of. And then, I mean, believe it or not, if you caught your happenings email on Monday, we already have sent out the save the date for our December 9th Christmas event that's coming up. So mark your calendars. I know we're kind of looking towards year end. So just wanted to get that date out there early so we could see as many of you as possible. And that takes us through the month.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that. Thank you for letting us know what to pay attention to. One thing we've done is read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I've renamed How to Be a Better Human. And on the 27th of the month, I like to look at the 27th principle, which is praise every improvement. One thing we don't do oftentimes is when people have an improvement, when something occurs or you see something you like, even small ones, people really thrive on praise. You may have thought it, but if you didn't say it, what good is it, right? So today I encourage you, if you find an improvement, if you see something that's, outstanding or just minusculely improved, mention it to someone. Mention the improvement as you go through. At any rate, I wanted to end with that now. Today, I want to thank you tremendously for helping us here from the galactic headquarters of Gentian, which is right here in Mequon, Wisconsin. And I want to tell you the idea of us helping you plan, live, and give in retirement is extremely important to us. The living part is going to be the next part we'll talk about here in about 25, 30 minutes on the web. We're going to gather a bunch of information. And it can be information for people as well who are maybe responsible for their parents. Their parents haven't made the decision to move into a new location, but they're going to need more help. Excuse me. So we want to even talk with them. The conversation isn't age-based. We're all going to have to deal with it at some point. Excuse me. So as we do that, I want to welcome you all to that conversation. We'll record it. Please join in if you've had an experience. We've had a couple of people already go into the question and answer here and say, how can I join in that? I've had a great experience. We want to share those. What's been great about it? What should we be concerned about? What's the positive, the negative side of the equation? So as you enter that, there's going to be some questions that you'll have we're going to want to enter. With that, thank you tremendously for your time today. Thank you for paying attention to what it is we're putting on here, if you will, in our bi-weekly webinar. Especially, we know your time is extremely valuable. We look forward to seeing you a little bit later today if you're here, or seeing you at your next meeting or appointment. Again, any questions you have, please feel free to reach out to us. We're here and ready for those, and we're continuing to do research and continuing to look at the questions you have to make sure we're answering what's most important to you now. With that, thank you for your wonderful Wednesday. Please have a great rest of your week.